inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
You don't want to put a lot of time, effort, and money into buying rental properties just to lose them if times get tough. Well, my guest on the podcast today learned that the hard way. Back during the 2008-2009 recession, he lost several of his rental properties, and things got so bad he ended up having to declare bankruptcy. The good thing that came out of all of this is he figured out how to bulletproof his rental portfolio to make sure that something like what happened to him before won't happen again. On the podcast today, he's going to share with us exactly what he's done to protect his rental properties. So let's take a really quick break. We'll thank our sponsors. We'll come right back. And we'll meet Leon McCray from Woodstock, Virginia. Having to evict a tenant is painful. The best way to protect yourself from evictions is to screen tenants, and the best way that I know of to screen tenants is TransUnion SmartMove. It's a really valuable online screening tool delivering credit, eviction, and background reports in minutes, and their proprietary tenant credit check predicts evictions 15% better than generic credit scores. See why over 4 million landlords have used SmartMove to make better leasing decisions. Use code RENTAL25 at checkout to save 25% at tenantscreening.com. That's code RENTAL25 at tenantscreening.com. The first step in buying a rental property is to get pre-qualified, and I would suggest you work with a lender that specializes in working with investors because the last thing you want to have happen is to get to closing and find out the money's not there and you can't close. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender and she'll pre-qualify you for free if you mention Rental Income Podcast. Find out more today. Contact Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE. lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about what your rental portfolio looks like today?
I have 20 units. That includes a 6-unit apartment building, a 5-unit apartment building, some single-family homes, and two churches.
And today you are living on your rental income, right?
Between my rental income and I also have retired military, retired civil service. Yes.
Okay, great. Now you've been through a lot. The strategies that you're using today to kind of build a moat around your rental portfolio aren't the same strategies that you used when you were first getting started. Why don't you kind of tell me like what happened and what led you to the principles that you have today?
All the gurus tell you, you make more money when you're highly leveraged and, as a, return on investment. And that's what I was doing. And, I think that it really worked well. It worked well for many years. So from like 2002, 2004 to 2005, worked really well. And I used to go to a lot of auctions and buy property back then, and sometimes sight unseen because the market was really just, it was just going up. And a couple times I was at an auction, and there was this white gentleman that would talk to me. And one particular time I think I was a high bidder. He pulled me to the side and said, you really might want to think about how you buy into these properties. You might want to consider buying at a 50% loan to value to really protect yourself. And, that kind of went against the grain. It went against all of my reading and my understanding of investing. But I took a mental note of it because that was way outside and out of alignment with what I was doing because I had done well and was making money. But I did take a mental note of that. But it wasn't until 2008 when the market crashed that I really understood why he was saying what he said. And as you know, you can make money highly leveraged as the market is going up. I mean, you can make really good money. But when the market levels off and goes down, it would really put you upside down and really can destroy you, and it really can take you out. And that's kind of what it did back in 2008.
Today, you use a 50% leverage for across your rental portfolio.
Yes.
Why 50%? Like, why not 60% or why not 40%? I know that gentleman you had met told you to think about 50, but like, was he 100% right that 50% is kind of the perfect amount of leverage to have?
Well, I don't know that that's perfect, but I will say this: I own some properties outright. There are others that might be one or two might be 90% leverage. Others are 80% leverage, and others are 50% leverage.
Okay.
But when I look at my overall portfolio, I try to keep it in balance at about 50% loan to equity, loan to value.
Okay.
Overall.
Now, if you were to give advice, maybe to your younger self, or maybe to a younger investor, like how do you think someone could get to that 50% mark? I mean, unless someone has a huge down payment, like how can we get to that 50% equity point?
Well, for one thing, you must understand how to buy right. And when I say buy right, I mean buy property, particularly income producing property, below market value.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to know your market. All right. So
right.
You're going in position, and I do take this serious. Like, you make your money when you buy a property.
Mm-hmm.
I always look for properties that have hidden value. In other words, I might be finishing a basement that's going to add value. I might it might have an extra lot that I can subdivide off and make money. I'm looking for whatever hidden value in that property. Maybe I can turn a 2-bedroom into a 3-bedroom. I can turn a 3-1 into a 3-2. I'm looking for that hidden value that I can upgrade and force my equity into the property.
Okay, so if there's a property that's worth, say, $100,000 that you can buy for $50,000 and do some improvements, and now it's worth $100,000, you've just created your 50% equity. So that's not cash you had to bring into the deal, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I do believe highly in leverage. Okay, I do.
Yeah.
All right, but smart leverage. I also believe in having some properties that I own outright, because you never know what will happen, and that's a fallback position. That if the market crashed like it did in 2008, I can always tap, even though that value of those properties may have gone down 50%. I still have money in those properties that if I got into a tight spot, I could go to that pocket of money and put it wherever I need to survive and get to the next level.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, you have a lot more options. I mean, you could always take money out of that property, or you could sell it if you had to. Yeah, having paid off properties is not a bad idea.
It's a good word that you said, options. Having different options is critical.
Yeah.
Because, I can leverage back into those properties. I can put a suck. I mean, it's a lot of different things that you can do when you have options. Those properties are sitting there. I can leverage those properties now that the market has gone down. Now I can buy more property.
Yep.
And when banks know that, that you are very highly leveraged, they start looking at you cross-eyed in a downturn market, and they start pulling those, those credit lines.
Right. Yep.
And if you've never been through that, you don't know how detrimental that can be to your overall portfolio. And so I listened to some of the gurus and I listened to what they say. And there are a lot of young gurus that didn't go through 2008. Man, I listen to what they say with a grain of salt because, the thing about the real estate market always goes up. It never goes down. That's just not true. Rents always go up. They never go down. That stuff is just not true. Maybe in some markets that might be the case, but for the most part, I watched a lot of people go down in flames when the market went down.
Yeah, with rents going down, that's the second thing that you've done to protect yourself, and I want to get into that. So, you like to, or I guess one of your other principle is that you want to be able to withstand a 30% drop in rents. Where did that 30% come from? Did that actually happen? Did rents go down 30% in your market?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Some of the rentals, absolutely. I mean, there were properties that were renting for $800 a month, and then you look up and they're now renting, for $600. Some even as low as $500. I mean, and look at it this way: when people lose their job, they've lost their job. Their income source is dried up.
Yep.
So it's not just like the real estate market has taken a hit. People lose jobs, and they have no income coming in. Or, there's one individual that I knew I was working with specifically. At the time, he was a truck driver making $50, and on average, making $50 an hour. Well, after the downturn, the only job he could get was making $19 an hour. So he went from $50 an hour to $19 an hour. That's a huge cut.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I had some rents that went down 30%. And look, this is one reason it went down as well. There were new home builders in the area that when the market took its dive, they had plenty inventory on the market and they couldn't sell it. And so these townhouses and houses and condos, brand new, that it could not sell, they started renting these units. And now the rents were around not much more or around the same price that I was charging for an apartment or for an older house. Okay.
Right.
And so people that are in an older unit, if they didn't lose their job, they're moving out of your place to these other units, to these brand new units.
Right.
So you're competing with new units.
Right. Yeah. That's tough competition. If a tenant can rent a newer place for the same price or less, I mean, they're going to leave. Absolutely. So is there anything, like, looking back on it now, is there anything that you could have done to keep those tenants, like maybe like reducing rents so that you're not having to deal with the turnover? Or like, is there anything that you could have done looking back on it to?
Well, that's the point. I did reduce
the
rents. Where I could reduce the rents, I did reduce the rent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sometime there, because you got to make that mortgage payment, highly leveraged, you couldn't reduce it less than, when you're looking at, payment, insurance, tax, and everything, you couldn't reduce it below what was coming in unless you had the money to, to make up the gap.
Right.
And that's why I use this, the 50-30 rule, because if, think of it this way. If I own a property outright, or let's say if I own it outright, I got the flexibility to reduce my rents and still have no problem either making the payment or transferring that money to somewhere else to offset, to make another payment up.
Right.
It just gives you more flexibility.
Yep.
I mean, this might not work for everybody, okay? But I'm telling you, and like I told you before, a lot of people that hear this and it goes against all the gurus and it won't make sense. But if you ever go through a downturn like you did in 2008, all of a sudden you'll remember, there was this black gentleman, Leon McCray. I remember him saying this. I didn't understand it, but you will remember
Right.
this conversation. I
Yep.
guarantee you
Yep.
will remember this conversation.
Yep. Yeah. So 30%. All right. So if your rent for a unit is $1,000 a month right now, you want to make sure that if you have to lower the rent 30%, so that would be $700, you want to make sure that you can cover your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance,
Absolutely.
whatever
Overall,
expense.
I'm not saying for just that one property. I'm
Right.
talking about your overall portfolio.
Right.
In other words, I look at my overall portfolio and I will reduce my my rental income by 30%. And overall, can I still make my payments and survive this if it was to do that?
Right. Right. Yeah. So that's I think that's a really important thing. And I think that you're right. There's probably a lot of people that are hearing this that are resisting that thought that, oh, that's crazy. Rents could never drop 30%, but they can. And they did in your case.
Absolutely.
So is there anything else that people should watch out for? Is there anything else that we can do today to prepare?
Well, for instance, you really got to do some smart things. One of the things that you got to avoid, having several properties tied together in a loan, okay, and then not having a way to unscramble that. And so now, if the market drops, you don't lose one property; you can lose 3 or 4 properties.
Right. So a lot of times you might take out a mortgage on, say, 4 different properties, and then you may bundle those 4 properties into one like commercial loan.
Correct. That can be devastating during a downturn in the market.
Yep. That's true.
It can be devastating. All right. So stuff like that. Now, this is what I learned from that. If you're going to do that, make sure you negotiate with the bank a release schedule. I went to banks before and I said, look, I got 3 properties that I want to bundle to get X amount of dollars. All right. But in doing that, I want to have a release schedule that if I want to pay off a particular property, I can pay off property 1 at this amount. I can pay off property 2 at this amount and property 3 at this amount. Boom. All right. So it allows me the flexibility that I can come in with money from another source and pay off one property without having to pay off that whole loan if there's trouble.
If you had followed these principles back during the recession, your 50% and 30% rules, like, would you have not had to go through the bankruptcy? Like, would everything have worked out for you?
It would have worked out, and now probably instead of having 20 properties, I probably would have 200.
Yeah.
Because now you have my credit wouldn't have been tore up, which has been tore up for the last 10 years. It just got back to what I had prior to the downturn in the market, which is well above 700. So now I can have, do bank loans and all that kind of stuff. But for the last 10 years, banks wouldn't touch me. Okay.
Yeah.
And so having that, the ability to get leverage or to get bank loans and stuff like that, be able to have access to money during the downturn. Understanding the market, I see tremendous deals that I could not touch because I didn't have the financial resources.
Yeah. And I'm sure it makes your life less stressful and just better not having all the stress today of being highly leveraged, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To be truthful with you, owing $1 million is still owing $1 million. You're still leveraged. And to me, that's still highly leveraged, but it's still not owing $2 million.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Just to summarize Leon's plan to bulletproof his rental portfolio is he keeps his rentals at a fairly low leverage amount at 50% loan to value, with some of his rentals paid off. And having the rental properties paid off gives him extra flexibility in case he needs to lower rent. And he wants to be able to survive a 30% drop in rent and still be able to cover all of his expenses if he has to lower rent 30%. And then the bonus thing is if you're going to bundle multiple mortgages into one mortgage to make sure you have a release schedule so that you can take properties out if you need to. I think Leon's got a great plan, and hopefully we won't see another recession for a long time. But if we do, I think Leon is going to be in a great position to survive it. Leon, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. And I would also like to thank our sponsor today. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. If you are looking to finance a rental property, whether you're just getting started or you want to add to your portfolio, the lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge. She's a nationwide lender, and she specializes in helping investors buy rental properties. She's got a ton of different loan programs, and if you want to buy a rental property, she can find a way to get you into the rental property. If you want to find out more, just go to her website. It's ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com. If you mention Rental Income Podcast, she will waive all the pre-qualification fees. NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. If this is your first time here, we've got new interviews every single Tuesday. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.